How do you call for peace when virtually everyone around you is in favor of war? Israelis who support the rights of Palestinians have long faced resistance and even threats. Since the attack by Hamas on October 7th, those expressing solidarity with people in Gaza or the occupied West Bank risk being labeled and treated like traitors. I'm Anelise Borges, and this is The Stream.
We're calling to stop the attacks on civilians in Gaza. We're calling for an agreement. We're calling for peace. We're calling to cease fire.
My name is Atalia Benaba. I'm a conscientious objector. I refuse to serve in the Israeli military because I refuse to take part in the occupation of the Palestinian people.
I just feel like this is such an important perspective, that there are many Israelis, Jewish and Palestinian, who are fighting for peace.
Me and my family, we seek no revenge. And we seek no revenge, we just seek peace.
Dead babies in Gaza won't heal our dead babies. The only way to move forward is with peace.
October the 7th sent shockwaves through Israel, and the killing of more than 1,100 people, most of them civilians, has plunged the country's progressive movement into division between those who continue to call for equal rights for all Palestinians and Israelis and those who no longer believe that peace is possible. Here to discuss this difficult moment with us are Robi, Damelin, the spokesperson for the Parents Circle, an Israeli NGO that promotes dialogue between Palestinian and Israeli families who have lost a child in this endless cycle of violence. Her own son was shot by a Palestinian sniper in 2002. Neta, Heiman, whose 84-year-old mother was taken by Hamas on October 7th and has since been released. Despite what her family has been through, Neta continues to promote peace through the Woman Wage Peace Organization. And Mitnick, a peace activist with Mezarvot and an objector, someone who publicly refuses to serve the Israeli military. Thank you all so much for joining us here on the stream today. Neta, I would like to start with you, if that's okay. I want to know a little bit about how you experienced October the 7th and how you found out about your mother, Ditsa, being taken by Hamas.
I woke up Saturday morning because I live in Haifa. There was no alarm. Then I woke up a little bit late, and then I realized what's happening. I called my mom. I asked her if everything is okay. It was around 8 a.m. She said yes, everything is okay. She's in the safety room. Among 10 a.m., we lost contact, and it took a few hours that we realized that something happened to her. We didn't know what. Just when the hours goes, maybe just on Sunday morning, we realized that she's taken by Hamas.
Mm-hmm. I imagine that the hours that followed were quite tense for you and quite difficult. Robi, how about you? How did you experience October the 7th, and how did it impact you and the people around you?
Well, that's a really difficult question to ask me, because really, in the beginning, I don't think anybody realized the catastrophe that was happening. Mm-hmm. Of course, it shakes up everybody's belief system. But I think it came from somewhere else. And the saddest part was I heard that Vivian Silva had been taken hostage. And she was the most extraordinary woman, who was one of the Women Wage Peace creators, who used to drive children from Gaza to Tel Aviv to hospitals and back again, who worked with the Bedouin. And for me, I was sure that if she came out, she would head a peace process. Mm-hmm. And here it was that she was actually burned to death. Mm. But it doesn't shake my belief that I understand why this all started. If you were a child growing up in Gaza, and you were, say, 14, and every 2 years there's a war, and every 2 years there are bombs, And every 2 years you have nowhere to run, and you also have no hope and no freedom of movement. What kind of child will you grow up? What will you be as an adult? And if I look at the kids who live on the border in the kibbutzim and in Sderot and Ashkelon and Ashdod, who are bombarded with rockets and from the 7th of October experienced this terrible, let's call it massacre almost, what kind of adults are they going to be? So I can't afford to shake up my belief system. I have to continue to work. I have to know that I can try in some way to express that a mother who is running away in Gaza, somebody must know about this mother. Everybody must have a name. You know, it is extraordinary how many people have been killed, but nobody will remember their name in another year. And this is much of what the Parent Circle does, is to tell the personal story.
Absolutely, you're absolutely right, and it's very good to have your perspective today. Tao, I want to turn to you if you could very briefly share where you were on October 7th and how did you experience that day?
So the night before, we were planning the protest, the weekly protest for the anti-judicial reform, and waking up to the sirens at 6:30 a.m. in Tel Aviv. We didn't realize how bad the situation actually was. And then we hear that 100 people have been killed. And then hours later, this number is up to 1,000. It was really a horrible experience for everyone here. But it did not shake up our opinion. It actually only strengthened my opinion that we need to address this problem that we have here. We can't just keep living with pushing it away from our experience. We have to actually solve this problem. We have to recognize that there are 7 million Palestinians here, and a lot of them are under a military occupation and siege. And at the end of the day, we're going to have to realize that we have to live together. There's no other option.
Tao, you actually also refused to serve in the Israeli military. Can you tell us how you came to that decision?
Growing up in a very militarized society, I was always against violence, and I always did not want to be the one pointing the gun at people. I always thought that I was going to go into some intelligence unit that will give me a good life after the military. But then after realizing what the intelligence units actually do, and realizing that they take part actively in the oppression of the Palestinian people in this apartheid regime, I realized that I could not take part in it. And actually I want not only not take part in it, but I want to change this place for the better. I believe that this place is, I like this place. I love this country and I love the people here, and I want to make this place better for everyone.
You all mentioned the fact that it was important to, I don't know, maybe stay even closer to your beliefs. Since the attack on October 7th, things have taken a turn for the worse for activists openly supporting peace, including this one. Take a listen.
I've gotten death threats to my mailbox, some very nasty curse words, and very nasty personal insults just because of my political opinion. I am following what's going on in Gaza, and I see the suffering, I see the killing, I see the slaughter. It breaks my heart, and it's horrible. I think this is inhumane. We need to stop the suffering in Gaza. This is very scary for me to speak now, but still I feel that it is very important that I speak up against the war, because very, very few people in Israel are speaking up against the war right now. I want to be one of them.
Neta, have you experienced anything similar to this kind of reaction to the work that you do as an advocate for peace?
Yes, I experienced every time when I talk at the TV or writing to the newspaper, after I get in my messenger very hard thing that they send me to Gaza, and they tell me that it's okay that my mom in Gaza because it's in a happy place now, and things like this. I don't care. I don't care. It doesn't frighten me, and I don't surprise, because the environment in Israel before the 17th October was like this, not for only for the peace people, for all the people in here. There is something that I must say. Nothing justified the massacre that Hamas made in the 7th of October. We must say it. It was against any international convention. It was they killed children, women. They raped. They took hostages, old people. In Kibbutz Nir Oz, there was peaceful people that all they want is to live in peace. Part of them was in Baderech Le'Achlama. They took people from the border, people from Gaza, from the border to the hospital, and those people are now hostages in Gaza. What I said is that if we knew to resolve the conflict before the 7th of October, it won't happen. But all we did is to manage the conflict, and we got the 7th of October.
There is obviously so much hurt and so much grief on both sides at the moment. Robi, has your work become more difficult as well?
Well, what I wanted to say is actually regarding your first question about do you get threats. Yesterday, I wrote an op-ed, both in English and in Hebrew, that they should free the prisoners if that would bring back any of the hostages, and that they could certainly, in my name, free the man who killed David, my son. Of course, we got some very ugly replies from that. The parent circle has continued to work. It is very painful. We live in a world, a kind of parallel universe because of the media. So each person sees their media. And the only way that we can overcome this is to have a sense of empathy, even if you don't agree. And it's quite extraordinary to see the kids who went to the summer camp in our organization, 50 Palestinian and Israeli kids who actually signed a charter for nonviolence and reconciliation and ending the occupation before, on the 21st of September, 2 or 3 weeks before the actual 7th of October. But once it happened, there was the black and white situation. They didn't want to talk to each other. So this is the work that we have to do. It's this repairing. It's finally, after unilaterally talking to both sides since October the 10th, say, they finally said they want to meet. All of this is very painful. We had a Zoom that was open to the public, and it was extraordinary. You showed a picture of Maozi Non, who in my opinion is a future leader of this country, who can actually talk out for non-violence and for and no revenge. By the way, there is no revenge for a lost child. Nothing I can do will bring my child back, except to take it to the point where I could say you cannot kill anybody in the name of my child.
I want to share another video now, because you all mentioned the fact that this has started prior to October 7th. This video features young Israeli children calling for the flattening of Gaza. This was posted and then deleted by Israeli national broadcaster Kan News. Take a look. Tao, does that surprise you that the national broadcaster would promote this kind of content?
This video, I'm familiar with this video, and it was made by a far right-wing organization, the same organization that put up, that called for the murder of all of the Palestinian prisoners, that put up a thing in in Kikar Dizengoff in Tel Aviv. I really believe that most people know that this military action will not bring us security. I think that this military action is mostly moved by revenge. And as we saw a couple of days ago, 3 hostages being killed by our own forces. This idea that there are no civilians in Gaza is going to bring to the death of our hostages, of the civilians in Gaza that deserve to live freely, and will not actually get any of the stated war goals. We need to call for a ceasefire, and yeah.
You mentioned that this was produced by the far right, but do you get a sense that that kind of speech and this kind of narrative has become more widespread, especially since the attacks?
Absolutely.
Robi says absolutely.
Yes.
Tao, what do you say?
What is happening is that people.
Yes, I agree. The mainstream has been giving. Sorry, Robi, you can go.
No, I just wanted to express something, that everybody's looking for an overnight solution. You have to give people time to breathe and people time to grieve. And also, if you're talking about that kind of ghastly little clip that you saw, people are always asking me, why do the Palestinians teach their children to hate? And I say, if you live in the Haitian refugee camp, you don't need anybody to have a curriculum of hate. So let's not look for comparison of suffering. Let's look for ways to change things that exist so that children in Gaza and children on the borders will not grow up hating. There's so much work to be done, and there's so much, please don't import our conflict into your country. Stop taking sides and creating hatred between Jews and Muslims. Be a part of the solution. Be part of changing the life of a child in Gaza, changing the life of the West Bank, which seems to be that nobody's even talking about the West Bank anymore.
Tao, you wanted to add something.
Sorry, Tao.
Yes, I wanted to add that not only are there death threats and social consequences for calling for a peaceful solution, the government has actually outright banned protesting against this war. Political McCarthyism against mostly Palestinian citizens of Israel, but also Israeli citizens that post solidarity with Palestinian civilians in Gaza or post to end the war on Facebook or Instagram. People are getting arrested.
I want to bring in a point made by contemporary artist Adam Yekutieli on how going back to what was happening prior to October 7th is also not enough.
I think it's also important to acknowledge that over the past 16 or so years, or however long it's been that Netanyahu has been in power, and also since, I would say, 1995, Israeli society has kind of become not only more divided, but and kind of like separated from its own self. But there's been no talk of the notion of peace, and there's kind of been this like approach of managing the occupation and kind of ignoring it and creating a situation in which it is kind of kept under this lid, but it's obviously a pressure cooker, and it's not sustainable, and it's not something that can last. But the reason I bring this up is that there's an entire younger generation that didn't grow up with the notion of peace ever being a possibility, and it's never existed in kind of like the collective consciousness.
Tao, he was referring there partially to your generation as well. How did you find your way into the position where you stand now, where you want justice and dialogue? Can you tell us a little bit about your own path to this position?
So I grew up in a house that was very political. My dad was a journalist and my mom a social worker. And we always talked about how there's this cycle of violence in this land that someone has to stop. And later I realized that there is a cycle of violence here, but the stronger side, the occupier side, we need to stop it, and I have to try and change this society from the inside. We don't have the privilege to just do nothing. We have to change.
Mm-hmm. Neta, you mentioned the pain and your grievances, but you also said that you continue talking about peace. And why is that so important to you right now?
I don't think revenge is a plan of action. I think that there is a lot of extreme people, not a lot, there is extreme people in both sides, and unfortunately they are influenced the discourse. Mm-hmm. But I believe the quiet majority just want to live in peace and quiet. Mm-hmm. And we need to influence our leaderships in both sides and make an agreement, any agreement that can bring us a quiet in this area.
Mm-hmm. Robi, are you hopeful? I know we've been talking about how difficult it has been, right, the last few weeks, but are you hopeful that, if anything, this tragedy may yield different results and bring about a much-needed, profound debate about the situation in this region?
Oh, I think the whole world has suddenly become involved. We've become very popular, and everybody's a grand expert. But yes, I am hopeful because I think people are suddenly realizing that we can't go on with more of the same. Otherwise, this whole land will be shed with graves. And so the time will come where we will have to negotiate. We must start talking to each other. We must, because if we don't, this will never end. And you talk to enemies. We don't need to be talking to friends. And we have to find a way where Palestinians and Israelis will agree. I don't care what that agreement is, as long as both sides agree on it. So, in a way, I've watched some of the extraordinary people coming out of this, like Maozi Non, like your family, who actually were already leftists before this happened. And I see them joining the parent circle, and I see how it can change the face when charismatic people like them are talking. The point is to keep this whole conflict in the news, because look at Ukraine, it's disappeared. Mm-hmm. Look at the West Bank, nobody's talking about that. Mm-hmm. Do you know how terrible the situation is in Jenin? I'm sure you do. Mm-hmm. So we have to bring all of this to the attention of the world, but we also have to bring it to the attention is the right of both peoples to live in security and in peace.
Tao, I want to give you the final word here. You are the future of this situation. Your generation is going to shape this region. So what do you hope for the future, and what are you determined to do? You mentioned being determined to continue to fight for change from within. Can you give us examples of how you're going to continue doing that?
Yeah, like I said before, we don't have the privilege to lose hope. I will always stay an optimist. And soon my military draft date will come up and I will refuse service, and I'm ready to bear with those consequences of refusing service. And I hope that through this action, I can get more young people to think about what they do with their military service, what they do when they grow up, and how this conflict has been handled the same way for 75 years. And we need a change. We can't keep acting the same way. We have to bring a change to this place.
You know that you face very serious consequences for not serving. You face arrest. Does that scare you?
No, I am not threatened by military prison, military jail. I'm fully ready to face what they bring on.
Tao, Robi, Neta, thank you all so much for joining this difficult but very important conversation today here on the stream. And I also want to thank all the organizations involved in working for peace in this region. If you have a comment about our show, you can always talk to us on social media. You can use the hashtag or the handle AJStream, especially if you have a topic that you would like to see us discuss here. We're always open to your suggestions. Take care, and I'll see you soon.